Hello everyone. Today I'd like to make a follow-up video, a response video to Matt at Ancient Architect's recent video on the second Sphinx, or his second look at the second Sphinx. And he found a really good article on the GCF1 Kinkawi's Mastaba features over here. Now, with this episode, guys, I'm going to have a lot of links for you in the description. If you look up here at the top at all my tabs I have open, all of these are videos that I'm going to reference. Most of them are Chuck at CFAP 7865, Ancient Architects, Charles Koss, and a few others. And I have a lot of articles to show you as well. First, before we get started, I do want to mention something about the Bevel block series. Now, there's an account that I follow on Instagram and Twitter, archaeology, just archaeology.org, and every now and again they give me really nice snippets of information and really cool little articles. Sometimes it's, pretty traditional, boring stuff that we've heard a million times, but other times they will give me a piece of evidence that I would not have found otherwise, and I don't think they realize the scope of what they found. So this article that popped up in my feed a few weeks ago, Reimagining the Crusades, they talk about how archaeologists are re-examining a lot of these old Crusader forts and just, I guess, looking into them deeper. I don't think they'd be looking into them for the same reason we are, but I want to point out one right away that I noticed. It was their cover photo. This one I cannot pronounce, I'm sorry. It's in Western Syria. It was built allegedly between 1142 and 1271. And it says it is one of the most striking of the nearly 100 Crusader castles found across the Middle East. 100. Well, we've already seen a few Crusader castles and Crusader forts, and we know that some of those involve bevel blocks. So this one, that was their cover photo. I just went to Google, and what did I find? Bevel blocks. Clearly bevel blocks. And these in Syria, like some people have mentioned in the comments, have the pointed style arches. But I want to note, guys, that they are in association with other more rounded arches. So yes, the pointed arches are typically, traditionally, an Islamic style. But we need to look at their associations with other architectural elements at these sites and try to determine like the oldest parts, the original parts, and if they are in conjunction with each other like this, in association with each other, then maybe there isn't as much of a distinction in the cultural and the architectural styles as we thought they were. So I'll be adding that one to the list after I investigate a little bit more and look for some more photos. There's a lot of foliage growing out of this structure. I find that interesting, right? So, over 100 Crusader castles found across the Middle East. So, I'm going to have to look into the Crusader castles a lot deeper, guys, and I think the bevel block list is about to get a lot longer. So, getting back to the response to Matt's video, Matt found this article from 2017 by Dr. Rita Abdel Halim, and I did not know that this article existed, but apparently this doctor has also taken an interest in the GCF1 feature and has done a little bit of investigation and research into this area. He's taken some good photos. He's proposed some interesting things. For example, holes and where they might go. Some that go deep down underground. So I highly recommend everyone check out this article. It's obviously the most recent article on the area. And to my knowledge, it is only one of 2 articles in existence specifically about it. The other being the Glenn Dash article. This is from 2014, And this one I refer to as the Mark Lehner article, because if we go down to the bottom real quick in the notes, you'll see Lehner, 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 Mark Lehner. This is all essentially his research, his work in the area. Some really good photos in here as well, and some really good information in this one. He mentions that the bedrock is of the same geographical strata as the Sphinx, and he proposes that it may have been, or the Sphinx may have been, maybe they both may have been, observation points for a port in the ancient past. See, here you go. You can see how the stone, how these strata of stone slope away from the pyramids. And you can see that when you look at high-resolution photos of the Sphinx and of the mastaba, the Konkawi's mastaba. You'll see how the geographical strata is at an angle, and it really makes the structures look tilted, but it's really just the layers of the rock. Oh, and by the way, comments are closed for that article. Now, essentially, both articles and Matt and Ancient Architects, they all agree that this feature was never a second Sphinx. Also, Chuck at CFAP 7865, he is also in agreement that this was never a second Sphinx. It was never a dog statue, it was never a lion statue, it was never an animal statue. And I have to agree with all of them, guys. I have to say that from what this thing looks like now, it doesn't look like it was ever carved to be an animal statue. I don't see any of the anthropomorphic features, anything like that. I don't see anything like paws, anything like feet, nothing like that. Now, when you look at the Sphinx, you see how the paws, the anthropomorphic features were created. It was all with blocks. The tail was done with blocks. The feet were done with blocks, front and back. The head appears to be conglomerate. All the headdress, the Nemes headdress, has been reinforced with cement. And as for the top, I know that as far as the geographical strata is concerned, these upper layers, these top crusts of rock are harder and darker. So the portions of this head may be original bedrock, but it also may be blocks as well, and cement, especially over the face. So who knows the exact composition of the head of the Sphinx? We definitely know there's a hole in the top of it. I find the protrusions around the neck really interesting, and no one talks about those. But I want to reference Robert Temple's work a lot in this video, because he's gone to great lengths to point out some things about the Sphinx that nobody has taken the time to pay attention to and to put together. Now, I'm in agreement with Chuck and Robert Temple that more than likely the original configuration of the animal statue was the dog god Anubis. It makes the most sense for Egyptian mythology and the context of the stories. Their culture incorporates dogs more than it does lions. Now, if you want to say that it was a lion, then you have to invoke that maybe something like a Hittite culture built it, another culture that maybe worshipped lions, and they featured lions more prominently in their mythology. That's what I think. And I go a little further than most people. Like I said in my Where I Stand video, I believe, like only one other person, Charles Koss, I maybe Wise Up, maybe a few other people, but as far as I know, the only people who have said it definitely are myself and Charles Koss, that we believe the bedrock structure was not originally a statue at all, and that it was later rediscovered and converted into a statue. The paws, the rear legs, the haunches, the whole rear of the rump, the head maybe, from above maybe the chin level, this could all be secondary additions. And then, of course, all of the stones along the flanks that make the structure wider and fill it out and give it the appearance of an animal. Now, I highly recommend Robert Temple's book, and I really, if you don't want to buy his book, guys, I have his lecture in my playlist tab, and it's a pretty comprehensive lecture, and he's got some really good photos that I can't show you because they're in his book and they're not available on the internet, but he has been inside of the Sphinx. He's taken several photos that show not only a small little chamber, if you want to call it that, a few meters down below where he's at here, just big enough for maybe one or two people to stand, but then he's also taken a photo that shows that the tunnel extends up and around toward the front of the Sphinx, and there are wooden beams, posts holding up the structure, it would appear, and it prevents anyone from going any further into the structure. So that's all he could get. That's as far as he could get inside of the Sphinx, but there is one confirmed passageway inside of the Sphinx. He does have a few good photos on the internet. If you just Google Robert Temple Sphinx, a lot of good photos will pop up. He has spent a long time collecting information and photos on the Sphinx, and some of the old photos are really rare that he finds. Like this one, for example, you can see how heavily eroded the rear of the Sphinx is, and he looks pretty emaciated if he's a animal at this point. You know, he's starving at this point. There's no belly to him at all, and the protrusions around the neck are really visible here. And obviously the Nemez headdress is really eroded, and on this side it's just hanging on. Another good old photo, this shows the crack in the back of the Sphinx, and Robert Temple proposes that there once was a way to get down inside of the Sphinx this way, and that it may be linked up to that tunnel that he found that goes out to the rump of the Sphinx and perhaps goes toward the front of the Sphinx. I think that's pretty compelling, and I find that really interesting. And in Robert Temple's book, he shows a picture with his wife standing either on this side or the other side in this area of the Sphinx, and you can see that there's a little indentation and a different configuration and coloration of blocks, and that could be another entrance into the Sphinx. Of course, everyone knows about the boxes around the Sphinx. There's this one on this side. On the other side, there's this one and then this one. And I had never heard a good explanation for these and why they're there or what's inside of them. For reference, this is where Robert Temple was in the back of the Sphinx, and the crack in the back has been filled in, and now it looks just like a set of stairs up to the top. And I'm sure that's the way people access the top today. But in the older photos, you can see that there was a deep rift in the back portion of the Sphinx. Yeah, looking back at this photo, you can see where the blocks create stairs, so the top and the back can be accessed. Now, with all that evidence that Robert Temple has found for holes in and around the Sphinx, we know there's one in the top of the head, one behind the head on the back. We know that there's one in the rump that he has explored, and there could have been one at the crack in the back. And there may even be more on either side of the Sphinx. And then, of course, in front between the paws and under the boardwalk, there may be more. So we can assume that the Sphinx is riddled with holes and passageways that could go deep underground in all sorts of places. And the reason why I'm bringing all that up is because in Dr. Halim's article, he points out the 10 openings in the structure and where they could go. Dark tunnel filled with sand. Obviously it requires cleaning, but other holes, corridors. So GCF1 is also riddled with holes and chambers and passages that could go deep underground. So what I want to propose is that yes, GCF1 was never a second Sphinx, but perhaps the Sphinx is a similar feature to GCF1, and that the Sphinx, because it was in a prominent location, they chose to convert it into a statue, whereas GCF1 over here was not converted and remained a ruin. I also want to point out that in front of the temples here, in front of the Sphinx, you'll see these stones. You'll see how they curve and go underground. This is because this area has not been excavated. It was excavated a little further in the past. Chuck has a video that shows an older photo where they excavated this a little bit further, and you can see how this region of this temple, I don't know what you would call it in the past, port maybe, sloped away and down toward the Nile. And the Nile, of course, was much closer to the pyramids in the past, and perhaps came up to close to this area. So all this talk of observation points for ports, I think that's pretty compelling. And it could go back a lot further than that. There could be more to these structures than just observation points. Now, a video I highly recommend everyone watch. This one is in my playlist tab. This one I try to promote in every comment section where I think it's appropriate. This video by Igor Tochilnikov. Igor travels the world. He went to Giza with Mohammed Ibrahim, here in yellow, Guide of Egypt. He's one of my subscriptions. I highly recommend everyone subscribe to him. He and Yusuf Arian, you will see him in a minute. Yusuf, you know, from Brian Forrester and Graham Hancock's videos, but you will see in this video, they are the only people I know of to go up to GCF1 and film inside of it. Now, I don't want to show too much of this video. I know even with fair rights usage, this is for educational purposes only. I'm not monetized, you guys know that, but I want you guys to go watch this video and look at it for yourself and see it in high resolution and tell me what you guys think about it. Because here, they're looking into GCF1 through one of the gates. You can see there is some really advanced stone cutting in here. This isn't just a lump of rock. There's much more going on inside of this structure. And these little calcifications on the roof, I think that's what I'm going to call them. It could be plaster that's starting to slough off, but I think that might be actual calcifications like stalactites like you would see in a cave. So that implies an extremely ancient age for those things to form in here. So here Yusuf is looking in another opening. There's about 3 openings that they look in, and this one you can see there's a dark tunnel that goes down, and I think the doctor also mentions this in his article. So there's definitely subterranean elements inside of GCF1. And here's something I really need to point out, guys. So look at this rounded header. First of all, that reminds me a little bit of the Dragon House of Ochi, the Greek example, the rounded lintel. That's just an interesting architectural motif, right? But look very closely, and you can see in low relief here, there is art all over this lintel. And Shermanator Osborne has been telling me to look for this, and I really didn't realize that, yes, there's lots of instances where without the right lighting and the right position here, you can't see what is actually inscribed. Now, with all this art inscribed on this structure, it should have some kind of historical context. But why is it only known as GCF1? Now later on in the video, just after they look at GCF1, they go down into a tunnel into a chamber. I do not know if it's the Kenkawi's mastaba, if it's GCF1, or if it's some of the other mastabas in the area. But right after they look at GCF1, they crawl down into this chamber and they see this giant stone sarcophagus. And this is the stone sarcophagus style that I call the bed frame motif, because to me it looks like a footboard and a headboard and an overstuffed mattress. It looks like a bed. So I haven't heard an official designation for these lids or this artistic style. So I just refer to them as the bed frame lids. And we see these all over Egypt in different materials and in very nice executions and precision executions, usually without inscriptions. Some of them have nubs and knobs and holes, usually circular holes. I don't usually see square holes. They do have bevel lines and margins in them, usually around the openings to create a airtight seal, or at least a really tight seal. And when I get around to making the sarcophagus album, what I'm going to do is make a sub-album just for these, because they're really mysterious to me. They're all over Egypt. You see them in some of the museums. You see a couple of them in the Serapeum, even though most of the ones in the Serapeum have the faceted style lids, the same as the one at the bottom of the Osiris shaft and the Alexandria sarcophagus recently discovered. Those have faceted lids, but this is a completely different style, and I don't understand the reason for them or the historical context. No one's explained that to me. I've even commented to Mohammed Ibrahim on one of his videos asking him about them. He said he would make a video, but that was over a year ago, and I know he's busy. He's probably doing many other things, doing tours and everything. But I really don't know, and obviously there wasn't a simple answer. He just would have told me right then. So I think there's a lot going on with these things, and we need to look at these a lot closer. They point out the vertical weathering in Kinkawi's mastaba that, to them, and I have to agree, that looks like water erosion to me. And then directly across from that, the crack in the back of GCF1 also looks like water weathering to me. And I think it's interesting that there is a crack in the back of it, just like the Sphinx had. That's interesting to me. There might be something to that. I don't know, but possibility. So definitely check out that video, guys, and I'll put that link in the description as well. I really want you all to check that one out. That one's really important if you want to see the best footage of that area. That's the video to watch. And I'm going to go through a couple more pictures with you guys here of GCF1 and the mastaba. I'll try to keep it pretty brief, but I just want to point out some more features that really are odd to me, and they look coincidentally like some things that we've been talking about in the Bevel block series. So before we talk about that, I just want to point out again, from this angle, you see the crack or the cleft in the back of GCF1. That reminds me a lot of the old photos of the Sphinx. Also, Charles Koss, in his video, he proposes that the Sphinx may once have been a double-headed structure or a twin peak structure, like the rump had a protrusion on top of it in the past just because of its odd shape. And when he said that, that was really interesting to me, because looking at GCF1, we see it kind of has a twin peaked or double-headed configuration. So there may be something to that. And I think if these two structures were similar in the ancient past, that one of these features on the Sphinx was damaged, broken off, or heavily eroded, or perhaps the people restoring it decided to carve one away, to remove one, to make it look more like an animal. But if you take one of these protrusions off, you have the nice base to work with to create an animal statue. You just add some legs, a tail, some paws in the front, and then you work this darker top stone. You may add some darker blocks, some other, maybe even the other protrusion was carved up into blocks and then stacked, and that is why they are the same color, and then cement was filled into the cracks, and then from there you can fashion a head. A dog head, a lion head, or a human head. And I'm in the camp that says it was more than likely a dog head, and then later carved into the human head. Now, looking closer at Kinkawi's mastaba, there's some interesting things to point out. These vertical grooves, Charles Koss and a few other people point these out. This is the remnants of a temple facade motif, an artistic architectural styling it's just heavily eroded, and perhaps water, perhaps wind, a combination of both. We'll see in some other photos in a minute better angles, better lighting, and a recreation of what it possibly used to look like. Here's one with good lighting. You can really see how they stand out, and you can see sort of where they used to be, went up a little farther maybe, before all this was eroded away. Now, the blocks at the top, they're presumed to be secondary, and I'm still in the camp that says that. I think they're really they look out of place up here, and they definitely would be more eroded. If you look at the erosion on this bedrock structure, it doesn't seem to match to me. It looks like these are reclaimed, perhaps, or carved and put up here secondarily. They should be way more eroded compared to the lower structure. I could be wrong about that, you know. I'm not a geologist, I'm not Robert Schoch, but it just looks to me like these blocks shouldn't be as nicely defined as they are. We can still see all the sharp corners on them, and there's processing indentations in them, which they look pretty interesting. I'm not sure what to think of those as far as bevels or margins or anything like that, but they do look odd. That finishing treatment on the surface looks odd, and there's different little angles and corners and square indentations in it. And you'll see that they're trapezoidal. Some of them are. So not all the angles are 90 degrees on the blocks. This under here looks to be a restoration job. I'm not sure, but it looks to be smaller bricks and mortar to shore the structure up to keep it from collapsing. And that's why it doesn't seem to match and it doesn't look like bedrock. It might be, though. I'm not sure. But my first inclination is to think that that is a restoration effort there. And looking at the other mastabas, these are pretty interesting. Really quality carved blocks, tight fitment, dry laid. They look, in some instances, to be trapezoidal. And interesting weathering in them. I don't know what to think of some of the weathering on it. But you can see that a lot of it is unexcavated. So we do not know what these things are, where they could go. A lot of mysteries involved with these. You can see graded over features on top, vertical shaft elements. You see this. What's this about? Is this a modern wall or walkway? Concrete? What's under the sands? That's what I want to know at Giza. Why don't they remove all this sand? Now this website, guys, it's researchgate.net. I'll give you guys the link in the description as well. This one's really important. This is some of the best technical information on the Konkawi's Mastaba and GCF1 that we have. So really good quality photos here. Right away on this angle, we see some really weird processing of the stone. I've tried to think about it like if these were preparation grooves for blocks to be mated to the surface, the bedrock. And in most instances that makes sense, but then like you have this little indentation, this odd little area here. I don't understand that area, what that could have been in the past, or how blocks would have gone into that. That's an interesting processing mark to me. I'm assuming it's a Japanese research team. You can see the blocks. I mean, this one especially, this precarious one on the corner here, that looks like a bevel block to me, guys. It looks like it has a margin all the way around it there. That's interesting. It really does seem like an eerie connection. This is really cool. This is a scan from above, so you can see in amazing detail every little bit, every single stone, and the different levels of the structure. And you can see it's not quite a perfect square. It's like a rhombus or a parallelogram, just a little bit shifted. And here's a scan from the side. This is really cool. It even shows the part that goes underground there. at the entrance. That's interesting. And I'm sure there's more. You see a little faint image here. I'm sure there's more inside that goes underground that needs to be charted and excavated. And check this out. This is a scan of GCF1. This is amazing. They call it here the Mokattam Formation. But otherwise, I Google searched for that, couldn't find anything. So I'm still going to have to refer to this thing as GCF1. But just look at this from this vantage point. If you knocked off this protrusion on the back and you filled in this crack, you have a Sphinx. You just work the head, you extend the front to make paws, and this is the start of the rear legs that you can work more of. I'm not saying that both structures were identical in the past, but they more than likely were similar structures. And the evidence here, I think, is the best for it. This picture is the best evidence. You can even see this line of weathering that goes down where over time, maybe in the other more exposed position that the Sphinx is in, this little area could have been eroded more and more of it could have broken away, or the rediscoverers just decided to demolish this and carve it away, reincorporate the blocks into the head maybe. I think that, could easily be done here. You could do the same thing here. Cut the back off, use these blocks to create a head. So I'll just close it up there, guys. A lot for you guys to think about and a lot of stuff for you guys to look at. But if you go through all these links, you will know just as much as any of the professionals do. So I think that this site is a complex and that more than likely the pyramids were the main facilities and that these structures here, these outlying structures, were stations that were connected in function to the larger facility. I see these causeways, and I don't think anyone's ever proposed that the one behind the Sphinx, the retaining wall, if that is a causeway or not, but it extends over towards the Great Pyramid. None of this is excavated. You see the shaft, the hole right there, the holes in the back of the retaining wall, that some of them are undocumented as far as I know. One is the Campbell's shaft, the Osiris shaft that goes down to the Osiris tomb. That one's pretty famous. But there's a lot of sand in this region. This just has not been cleared away. Even on the right side of the Sphinx here, none of this has been cleared away. And it baffles me because there could be so much more to be discovered. And as Chuck mentions, in the front of the temples here, there could be a lot more to this potential port that goes deeper into the ground here that we just need to clear the sand away to see. So all links will be in the description. Please try to check as many of them out as you can, because if you check all that out, you will pretty much be pros on the subject. You will know as much as anybody else, and we can start discussing some of this stuff, and I can hear other people's viewpoints and get their insights. A lot of interesting things going on at Giza, everybody knows that, but some of these lesser known secondary features are just as mysterious as the main monuments. And I'm really compelled to think at this point, guys, that all these structures are connected in function and to a single culture, perhaps a single construction project. So keeping a skeptical viewpoint, but also an open mind, and I'm trying to absorb as much information and research as I can, and hopefully it's the best research. I'll let you guys help me discern that, but for now, that is all. Thank you guys for hanging out with me, and we will talk to you next time.